Joining us here for another webinar. I'm very pleased today to bring forth a topic that is pretty near and dear to every business owner, and it's all about cash flow. Today we're joined by my good friend, Nicholas. Nicholas is the partnerships manager over at Alternative Payments. We're going to do a lot of talking about how alternative payments can help you unclog your cash flow pipeline, and basically talk a little bit more about some of the automation capabilities that are there that you may not be thinking about. So with that, just some quick general housekeeping, a little bit about Raven Automation if you're not familiar. Raven Automation is essentially your partner to help deliver RPA or robotic process automation into your own businesses. We work exclusively with MSPs. We're basically founded by a group of people that have years and years of experience in the MSP industry. We know exactly what kind of things that you go through on a day-to-day basis and how to best help. Nicholas, why don't you take a second and tell us a little bit about alternative payments?
Yeah, thanks, Jared, and thank you to you and the whole team at Raven, obviously, for having me on. It's a pleasure to meet everyone. As Jared mentioned, I work here at Alternative Payments. We are a automated accounts receivable and payment processing solution that's been built specifically for the MSP space. We integrate into all the major PSA and accounting software so that you can have this great kind of end-to-end loop for receiving all the information needed to build an invoice and automating the process of getting that invoice paid. We were founded in 2021. We have about 50 different employees on our team, and we are currently servicing about 600 plus MSP customers and are on track to process about $1 billion worth of ACH and credit card payments for those folks.
Wow.
So yeah, really excited to kind of chat more about what you can do to increase your accounts receivable kind of automation flows, and also, of course, save money on the kind of costs associated with that. But I'll give the floor back to you, Jared, and we'll kick her off.
Well, thank you. So today on our list of topics, we're going to talk a little bit more about thinking like an automation strategist. We're going to talk more about some of the common problems that you face in your cash flow pipeline, specifically not getting paid. I hate that, not getting paid. We're going to talk more about the workflow. What does it need to look like? We're going to talk more about the concept of full stack automation for accounts receivable. And then last, some cash flow and time savings, and maybe some things that we could do next. So before we dive into this, the concept of thinking like an automation strategist, common questions that you really need to ask yourself. Why are you automating to begin with? Is your end goal there to save time? Are you looking to reduce your costs and maybe save some money? Maybe you're looking to reduce friction points for your clients or your employees. Maybe this is all about driving efficiency. All of these questions are important, and you need to understand the why. That why is going to translate into helping you establish what your ROI is for what you're building, and really help you determine whether or not what you're doing makes sense. Nicholas, I'm curious, how does that thought process play into what alternative payments does?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's really great because we don't think about just the payment processing piece alone. What we really think about is accounts receivable as a whole. And when you think about accounts receivable, you think about all these different traps that you get pulled into. The person doesn't get my email invoice, they don't respond until the fourth one, or they're delayed, or they have an issue with their credit card, or all these different things that kind of come up. And so we really want to look at the biggest picture of it, which is once you have the data that you need to build that invoice and you know who you're charging it to, how can we automate everything that comes forward from that? And because if you are able to kind of work towards that gold standard of having people on a recurring revenue kind of contract, and you set the terms from the beginning of that relationship to say, hey, on this date, I'm going to pull this money from this account. Are you okay with that? Well, you can basically remove any manual work you need to do from that day forward until you need to kind of negotiate that contract in 12 months. And so that's, a huge savings of time, especially if you're an MSP that's constantly growing and trying to take on more new clients without necessarily constantly buffering up the staff of your admin. So I think that's kind of how we try to look at it on the big picture.
Well, speaking of time, About how long does it typically take for the average MSP to get paid?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've got this great slide here. This is based off of data from just the industry as a whole, and then also data we have from our 600 clients. We're in a really unique position where we're able to see these really great trends of folks that move from past places and move onto our platform. And so industry-wide, as of right now, MSPs are typically paid 20 days after the due date, which would essentially be like a net 16 terms. So if you put that all together, it essentially implies that there's 36 days it takes after the invoice creation inside of whichever system that happens before you actually get paid. And so that's incredibly problematic because from a cash flow perspective, you're ending up with these big spikes and these big lows. And so if you're able to find a way to level that, which would be the next slide here.
You mean I can't like pay my employees 36 days after they've done the work?
No comment. And so, basically this next slide here is just saying if you were able to be paid immediately because you had these terms and you had a system that could automate that process for you, if you made say $3 million a year in total revenue and you created that increase in cash flow, you could essentially create $150,000 of money that you were already on track to get, but now you've moved it forward. And so now you have this new cash inflow. And so from our perspective, what we love to kind of ask people back from this kind of data is, what would you do with that kind of money if it was available to you and you were able to change your systems and kind of get access to the thing, that we would all want, which is a faster kind of turnaround on cash flow. You can put that money towards sales and hire a new salesperson. You could put it towards kind of upgrading some of the tech systems and spending a little bit more money there. All the options are available to you. And also, you're now making yourself more attractive if you're in the situation where you're an MSP that's looking to be acquired, or maybe you're on the way to retiring soon and you want to set your business up to be in the best position for an acquisition. All of these things kind of play in there together and are all really strong positives.
It's interesting. And that 150,000, that's based on an MSP with 3 million in annual revenue, right?
Yeah, this is just kind of the numbers that I picked just for this kind of webinar. And so if that person was doing 3 million of revenue and they were on that older cash flow model and industry average, and they were able to move to a much quicker, they could create this $150,000 of cash inflow.
So from your position, what do you think is really the ultimate cause for the delay in MSPs getting paid for the work that they're doing?
It's unclear expectations that are set up at the start and heavily manual processes. So I think that a lot of this could be even attributed to carryover from the origins of the MSP space, which we, way back in the day started as a strictly break fix model, which is probably the most unideal kind of financial model to work under.
The dark ages.
Exactly. And so I think we've now evolved and we're kind of all on the same page that really the ideal relationship with a customer is kind of a long-term recurring revenue where I'm your IT expert. I'm going to provide this kind of ongoing service and cybersecurity protection for you under these terms. And this is what it will cost on a monthly basis. And then if we have unique projects that are separate of that, we're going to charge that on a separate kind of basis. And so in those scenarios, we're still pushing and moving people towards having the contracts that lay out really strong terms, because right now they'll have the contract, but maybe it doesn't spell out exactly how and when they should be charged. And so it creates these little delays, and it also creates this manual work where there's one person in the office on the accounting team, and she or he is just kind of manually juggling all these different customers.
From the perspective of getting paid, when it comes to things like automated payments, what do you see in the industry now with companies forcing their clients to move to automated payments? Is that kind of where we see things headed in the trend, or is that really kind of new? What are your thoughts there?
I think it's a natural evolution, but I don't think it should necessarily be something that you're forcing. I think it should be part of the onboarding to start, and that's what we normally recommend with our customers who are kind of seeking, more of a consultative approach from us and what we've seen on our end. And so the idea there is the new customers, you want to set that relationship and just say, hey, we don't accept checks. The way we do things around here is we're going to get your ACH bank info. we're going to agree to payment terms, and then we're going to charge you to that account this amount on that day. And so, because that's happening at the very beginning of the relationship, it sets a tone, and it's not, kind of like forcing new credit card fees or something like that. It's not the same energy. It doesn't have the same kind of difficulty associated with it.
Got it. So you brought up already, and you've really got a great slide here. There's a lot involved in this whole life cycle, from the original closing of the deal to performing the work to getting the invoice created and actually collecting the payment and then crediting that payment back into the correct account. Tell me a little bit more about that process as a whole.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that this will be really helpful for putting some of the stuff that we've already talked about into context. And so I would say, like the ideal workflow for a modern MSP today that has the highest degree of automation possible kind of starts with the quoting tool. And whether that's integrated directly into your PSA or is a separate tool, we work with many of them already. But essentially, you create the quote, the customer agrees to the quote, and then immediately you essentially get paid for that quote, and you kick off that relationship right then and there. And you set the terms for how the automated payments will work. So now the PSA has a contract in it, potentially, depending on how your workflow works. I realize that every PSA and every accounting software is going to be a little different, so you'll have to bear with me on the aggregate average. But essentially, we've got the quote, it's been approved, it becomes a contract that then is in our PSA potentially. We are receiving the money right away by having one of our integrations, and then we're pulling that contract into alternative payments main system, which is speaking to both the PSA and the accounting through direct integrations. And we're being able to set up that automated workflow so that the next payment for, January 1st or whatever the next kind of payment term will start is already set up into the system. And you can kind of essentially wipe your hands clean and be notified if there's any problems, like a credit card that's expired or something like that. So it's a quote to cash. And it only works if you're able to integrate your AR system deeply and directly to your PSA and accounting software.
Well, this is the time for a nice little shameless plug for us. Internally, we use a quoting system that's actually not directly tied to our PSA. Yeah, it goes back and talks to HubSpot, but that's where the integration stops. And that's by design for us. So we've gone through a process of building out automation so that when that deal is closed won in HubSpot, our account execs can simply fill out a form, and in the 30 seconds or so it takes to fill out that form, it's going to create the client in the PSA. It's going to set up the agreement with all the additions and all the rates, set up the billing contact for invoicing, kick off an email to send out to that new client to help them set up automated payments, provide additional information, schedule their onboarding. So there's a lot that can be done outside of the payment cycle just by simple integrations with other automation tools as well. So that's something I want to throw out there as just kind of a talking point for anybody else that's listening out there thinking about how do I work with tools that may not directly integrate.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I mean, it's a bit of a dangerous position for me to try to speak to something general because it's too general, whereas everybody's workflow ends up being quite unique. And so what I would say to folks is the big focus is just try to create a nice end-to-end system that is repeatable, that goes from quote to cash, and then essentially recurring revenue. And so how you go about that and what systems you use, there's a ton of flexibility. And whether you're using kind of Jared and his team to build up some of the automations that are going to create those people into the PSA, and then having something like us join in from after that, there's essentially a whole way. There are many different ways to go at it. And we see many different kind of solutions that people use from our side as well.
So in the spirit of automation, let's talk about the automation suite capabilities of alternative payments.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've already talked a fair bit about our automated kind of payment schedule. And so, a really great thing for that is you could go and set customer by customer specific rule sets. And I could say, okay, Jared owes me $1,000 every month. I'm going to set up a specific rule for Jared that charges him that invoice amount on this day of each month from this account that he's already uploaded to our system. and then I'm going to wipe my hands, and it's just going to kind of run for the foreseeable future. So, that's like a really powerful automation for saving you the time of manually sending out stuff. We still see a lot of folks that do manual ACH pulls where they have to go to their bank once a month on a specific day and then manually input the pull that they want to make from a specific account. And so imagine you have 40, 50, 60 customers and you're doing that for 80% of them. We could automate all of that within one day, and you're going to save yourself hours and hours of work on a monthly basis. The other side is we also have automations for email reminders. And so it's common that people are going to kind of ignore your first email, and they'll even claim they didn't get it because their inboxes are total messes. Mine is as well. And so we have a setup where you can send and you can set up automatic email reminders just to keep that kind of top of mind so that those folks pay their bills in a more timely manner versus go into the kind of a collections workflow, heaven forbid.
Awesome. In the spirit of some of this, one of the common things that people ask me when we start talking about what kind of automations could we possibly do for our end clients, I frequently talk about the accounts receivable process and specifically collections, right? No matter what your business is, you have some form of AR collections process that's out there. And that process is usually pretty similar, at least in the beginning stages. You're almost always going to have to send out that message with another copy of the invoice as an example, and some language asking for someone to go ahead and submit that payment. And if they don't, of course, you step up the tone of that, maybe send another copy of that invoice, and continue down that path. I'm curious, how exactly does alternative payments help solve that problem?
Yeah, that's a great one, because we do actually have a collections feature. But before I describe it, I'll just describe kind of what leads before then, as far as like the guest checkout experience, so that we have a frame of reference. So if a customer is sent you send an invoice through our system to them, and they go to pay through it online, they'll be presented with a very clean, modern-looking guest checkout experience that will be branded with your specific MSP, and also the colors and the kind of brand identity. From there, they actually have three options to pay their bill. One is the standard online ACH. Two is a credit card, where you can pass on the fee, or you can choose to absorb the credit card fee, and you can do that globally or per customer. And then third is an option to pay in installments, which is essentially like a financing feature that we offer for B2B payments, where you would get paid out immediately if they're approved, and then we take on the responsibility of essentially running, say 5 payments over 5 months. And so all those options help to increase the activation rate and the likelihood that customers will pay their bill and will do it quickly. But in the situation where you have a difficulty with an outstanding invoice and you feel like it should be going to collections and you don't want to take that on yourself because it's annoying and it's a ton of work, we have a relationship that we've built with a third-party collections agency, and we've negotiated a really strong rate because of our 600 plus customer base. And so from within the platform, you can send an overdue invoice to collections. You would pay a 1% fee for the current outstanding balance, which is essentially like the activation fee to get the collections team going. They go seek out that money, and whatever money they're able to successfully bring back, you would get 80% of, and then they would keep 20% of. And so you're essentially removing all of the manual labor of doing the collections process yourself in-house with the equivalent of 6 or 7 clicks. And then we also have a very successful rate because these people are professionals and kind of handle this stuff directly. And so at least you're getting something for that outstanding invoice instead of nothing. But ultimately, hopefully you never have to use it, because hopefully no one goes to collections.
I wish I had known about that for the first time I had to make a collections call, because let me tell you, that was not a comfortable experience for me with no background in collections.
Well, it's not something that you really want to be dealing with as a business owner, right? Like, none of us got into starting the things that we're a part of because we were, wanted to bug people for money. I mean, all of us, I think, are probably pretty good at paying our own bills and kind of just see it as a given that, we would pay ours. So it's a tough, annoying situation.
So let's talk about just kind of an overview of alternative payments.
Yeah, so we've talked about a lot of these different features. This guest checkout experience, this collections, the paying in installments, and all this different stuff. but what have we ultimately been able to deliver for folks, and you know, what does that look like on the big picture? And so folks that use alternative payments have an average collection time of 5 days, which is a comparison to the 35 of the days of the industry average. That number continues to improve as we move folks more to like the most aggressive version of automation. 62% of the payments on our platform today are processed in an automated fashion. We have a 96% CSAT score from folks that, you know, respond to surveys after calls with our CX team. Our CX team is also based in North America and has a, you know, essentially same day response time for any tickets that you create. We're really proud of that. It's a really big part about why I chose to join the team. And it's historically been one of our biggest identifiers in comparison against other payment processors in the MSP space. It's just that, you know, this is your money. It's really important to you. If you do have issues, you want to get really timely answers. And so we've been able to deliver those outcomes in a way that I think makes us really shine above the rest, and is a reason to kind of consider, I think. Then, perfectly in line with kind of this conversation and Reimer automation and stuff like that, our average is a 10-hour savings for automating manual processes per customer, which is, you know, a huge thing, especially when I see most MSPs struggle to be able to assign labor appropriately because they're just growing too quickly and there's just only so many people that know the business well, and it takes so much effort and time to train a new person. So if you're able to bring in a system like ours, not only are you going to get paid faster and increase your cash flow, not only are you going to lower the processing costs because you're going to move away from more difficult things, but you're also going to save, you know, 10 hours of work for one of your admin staff, or maybe it's you currently doing it.
For sure. I mean, I can tell you when it comes to just part of the reason why we chose to use alternative payments internally, after we started to get everything set up and implemented, I can tell you that just last week when I checked my AR over 45 days, $1,500. That's it. You know, that alone, the result there, the outcome, whatever you'd like to call it, that alone is the driving factor to keep us going. It's just the simple fact that it has largely helped solve an AR problem for us.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's a huge part of how we want to grow our business is exactly what you just described, is your own positive experience as an MSP. You know, being able to come onto the show and have you be a customer and someone that has seen other options in the space and who has kind of chosen us is a really great compliment, and it kind of speaks to the kinds of webinars that I like to be a part of. Because if you didn't like us and like our team, I don't think I'd have the opportunity to be here. And so, you know, we appreciate the opportunity to be in charge of your payments and, you know, take on that responsibility.
Well, I mean, let's face it, in the grand scheme of things, talking about payment solutions is probably not the sexiest part of running a business, right? Or honestly, not. AI is the latest buzzword in our industry, right? Everybody wants to have something related to AI happening in their business. This is not necessarily the thing that's on the forefront of everyone's mind. A lot of partners already have solutions in place. They kind of think that they're set and forget kind of concept. But this may be the time for some of them out there to go back and reconsider what they're doing. You know, I think this is a great segue into the next slide that you have here as far as, you know, what could some of that cash flow and time savings really look like? I mean, tell us about this.
Yeah, totally. So this slide's got a lot of numbers on it, so we'll kind of walk it through one by one. But you know, essentially, we were talking a lot about that cash flow at the start, and so there's that kind of that signal again. In this illustrative case study, we're basing it off of 1 million of revenue, and so in this situation, if you were on an industry standard of 35 days to process your payments, and you moved to alternative payments and did the, you know, were able to get our average of 5 days, that's a $50,000 incremental cash flow that's going to happen as soon as that change is made. And that's, you know, pays for the system and then some easily. And then when we go to the next line, of course, you know, the time that's often spent on manual billing over a given year, you know, for someone that's in this 1 million range, that's 500 hours. If you really take the time to add it all up, especially things like dealing with those handful of check customers who just, you know, refuse to pay by ACH or credit card. If you're able to kind of handle and take care of all those different things and get onto the most efficient automated process, you know, you're looking at 6K of labor savings that you can then point in a different direction of the business and make improvements there. A lot of folks that come to us previously were absorbing credit card fees A lot of that has to do with many of the folks in our industry don't actually do the processing of the credit cards themselves. They have a third party. And so because they have a third party, it's very difficult to attach those fees to the invoice. And so what will happen if you're using some of these other bigger kind of legacy systems in the MSP space is you'll get the bill, but then you'll get a separate bill for the credit card fee as a customer. And so what happens is I find a lot of these MSPs just absorb the credit card fee because it's kind of annoying, and they also are a little bit nervous to pass on the fee. And so 90+% of folks on our kind of platform currently pass on the fee at 2.9% to the customer. And we do that because we do the processing in-house, and so we will change the invoice at that moment. And we're offering these other options like ACH and the paying in installments feature, so customers don't feel like they're being forced to pay this kind of inappropriate fee because credit card is the only option. And so if you think about that alone, that's another 6K of savings. The last piece of this is the compliance and risk factor, and mostly revolves around PCI compliance. It comes into play a lot when customers of ours are referring us to end customers who don't know about their PCI kind of compliance risks and obligations. And so if you don't have a fully PCI compliant system as of today, that's a serious problem. And of course, Alternative would be able to bring you into a fully compliant state so that you don't have any concerns there. And putting a dollar amount on that, of course, is very difficult and is essentially quote unquote priceless.
So wait, you just said something I want to kind of target in on here. Getting your customers to use alternative payments?
Yeah. So this is a lot of the work that I do on the partnership side, which is kind of a new development. But we've always had the luck and the privilege of being referred to other MSP peers. So, we may onboard a company and then they would say, oh, my friend a couple states over, he has a problem with XYZ competitor. I told him to check you guys out. And so we try to say thank you by, having a revenue share component of our referral program. But what's happened is that it extended beyond that and just being peer-to-peer. And we've had a situation where because MSPs have so much respect within their space by their customers and have so much trust that they've developed, those customers will ask them about things that maybe fall out of the traditional IT scope. And they'll say something along the lines of, hey, I like the process of paying my bill. I'm actually quite impressed by it. It looks really nice. I'm using, Stripe and I don't really like it. Can I use what you use? And so those introductions have happened kind of naturally. And now we have a more formal way for our customers to be able to refer end customers so that they can become PCI compliant, save money on some of the big names out there like Stripe and QuickBooks Payments, and kind of take advantage of special pricing through that referral.
Okay, I know we're going to go a little off script here for a second, so I'm going to apologize in advance. I think that this is something that we really don't want our partners to miss out on, right? A lot of what we do in these webinars is talk about ways to help make a business more efficient, ways to help drive more ROI into a business, ways to help streamline or gain more revenue. But in this case, just this simple referral program is a great way for them to earn residual income. What does that conversation look like? If I'm an MSP owner, how do I broach this topic with my clients when I'm having those regular QBRs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the QBR is a great moment to do it. Also, in an onboarding stage is a great way to do it. I have many different MSP partners that I work with that approach it in different ways to their end customers. The most common I see and the one that feels like the most natural fit from a trust perspective is they'll simply inquire about PCI compliance, and they'll say to those folks, all right, we're getting you onboarded here. You've got this many computers and this many users. Part of our checklist is to ask you if you're currently using a PCI compliant way to handle your payment processing. Can you share with me a little bit about how you handle accounts receivable? And that opens up a conversation where then those folks can say, well, by the way, just so you're aware, we use a company called Alternative Payments. We trust them with all the money, and it's the way that you're going to be paying your bill going forward. And if you're interested in checking them out, we do have a partnership with them, and you can receive a 10% discount if you go through us. And then, of course, that ends up being an introduction to me and my team. We follow up with that customer, see if there is an appropriate fit. And if they do become a customer, then we share essentially a 10% revenue share of that new closed won deal with the partner. So I have many partners that have actually essentially offset the cost of our platform by making a handful of introductions. And sometimes these introductions are as simple as a single email just saying, hey, Nick, meet my friend Alex here. He's got a roofing company and he's really struggling with, the fees that QuickBooks Payments charges. And that leads to a deal and they get, this revenue share that completely offsets, the cost of alternative payments.
Interesting. I appreciate that. I mean, it's probably something that we could do more of here with our own partners.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's available to anyone on our system. I do want to jump back though, just to explain the spirit of it, because I think that's really important to me in the role that I have here, which is, I didn't necessarily mention this at the start, but my entry into kind of career and my first sales job, so to speak, was when I was in high school and I started a event rental business, which was essentially bouncy castles at the beginning of it. And so I got this idea alongside my dad. We bought bouncy castles from China and we would go and set them up for people's birthday parties. And, we would charge a couple $100 and we had a pickup truck that we drove around. And it was like my first introduction to sales and building relationships. And what I realized is that I was like a terrible marketer inherently, and I just never really enjoyed marketing. But there were these huge, easy opportunities for really strong referrals if we were able to deliver a really great experience to people. And so our entire business grew strictly from referrals, where we'd have a great birthday party. The parents that came with their kids would see it and would say, hey, my kid's birthday's in 2 months. I want this thing. This is great. You seem like a nice guy. The things are clean. This is awesome. And so in a long about way, fast forward 10 plus years, here I am in this role, and we're trying to basically recreate the same thing in a much more professional kind of thoughtful way. And so, that's the spirit that I'm coming to this from, which is the best possible way for us to grow our business is from an earned word of mouth. And that's what we're trying to accomplish with the referral program.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's similar for us. Lots and lots of our referrals come from our existing partners today. So we're always thankful for that. So let's move in. Building a culture of automation. Think like an automation strategist. Okay, great. We fixed the accounts receivable process. Where do we go next? There's lots of places that we can go inside of our businesses to build more automation, drive more efficiency. Some of our accounting and back office processes like accounts receivable is only one area. The reality is there are tons of opportunities in every single business. Common things that we do on a regular basis for our partners: automated dispatching and triage. We're partnered with other AI-based chat tools like Thread to help implement additional workflows and automations to create zero-touch ticket environments. A lot of people don't think about some of the back office tasks as some of the things that can really drive value in a business. So after we go with the accounts receivable process, Nicholas, where else could we go? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I realize like my day-to-day is always in this kind of AR space, and these are the problems and the things I hear about. It is clear that there are some really great opportunities to bring, AI-like features into this workflow and kind of help unlock that next step. Our company is trying to do it in a very kind of staged crawl, walk, run approach. There's this big desire right now in the space for vendors to just kind of slap AI onto everything just to get that kind of initial buzz. But we're taking a little bit more of a measured approach and trying to be really thoughtful about where it actually can drive value and actually make a meaningful difference. And so, part of that is also envisioning like what the big loop and what the big goal is. And so I think at our company, we really want to integrate AI into our system at the same time that we become more of a full circle platform. So as of today, we help you with the accounts receivable portion and automating that and processing those payments. But there's another side to that same coin, which is money comes in, but money also goes out to pay vendors, especially in the MSP space when many MSPs juggle quite a few different vendors. And so the long-term vision for our company here is to be your AR and AP solution so that you can have a single place to manage all the money that comes in and the money that goes out. And then we can use AI to give you insights to your data because we also have access to all these other MSPs in the marketplace that we work with. And so when you're negotiating, potentially, maybe our AI can use that data to say, hey, this particular vendor, this is probably the best rate that you could get, or here is something that you might want to negotiate, or I noticed that your tech stack is like this, and this side of it is costing the most. Maybe you should consider X. And so there's going to be these different opportunities for us to offer insight that comes back from actual proper data reflective of the entire industry versus essentially asking ChatGPT a prompt.
That's pretty valuable right there. I heard a little rumor, so I'm going to put you on the spot again. I heard a little rumor that there may be an API coming for alternative payments.
This is true. I got to be careful about how much I talk about it, though. It launched just yesterday, or at least the day before, and it's our version 1. We're really excited about it. I think we're one of the first folks in this kind of space to be able to offer this, and we're hoping that some of the more geeky automation guys like you and your peers will be able to use it in some kind of new fun ways. But now it kind of opens up the Pandora's box to be able to integrate our system into more things and more places where previously we weren't able to. So we've always had a great reputation for our PSA and accounting integrations, but now this API opens up the door to kind of doing a lot more things that are for a lot stranger or less common kind of use cases.
Well, I can tell you that by the end of today, our team will have a custom integration built between Roost and alternative payments. We may not have a functional automation yet, but we'll have the integration built before the day's out.
Man, that's some classic Jared confidence, because you haven't even seen the docs. I only told you about this a couple hours ago.
Oh yeah, would you mind sending those docs over to me so I can make sure that we can do it? Yeah, no, we'll definitely get it built and start to see what we can do, and maybe have some good use cases to share with the community on some future episodes here.
I'd love to see it. I'd love to help be a part of it. I think it'd be really fun, and it'd be a perfect marriage of our two kind of different companies.
Well, I think in the spirit of this is probably a great time to shift towards a wrap up here. So, just again, if you're interested in talking more automation and seeing how Raven Automation might be able to help, go ahead and scan that QR code, book some time with our account exec, Tom, or of course with me, myself, and I'll be happy to talk through some of the options that are out there. Likewise, Nicholas.
Yeah, so I've got my little QR code there. Also, my email address is nicholas@alternativepayments.io. I'm happy to chat with anyone. It doesn't have to be a sales kind of demo per se. It can just be a conversation. We're in a unique position where we work with these 600 plus MSPs, so we get to see a lot of behind the curtains things and can share a lot of consultative kind of feedback about what you might want to think about. Also, just want to once again say thank you to Jared and his team. We are really proud to be their payment provider and be entrusted with their payments. And I also have heard just truly lovely things about him from other folks that kind of work with alternatives and also happen to have a Raven Automation kind of connection. So definitely check them out. They're a great team.
Well, we appreciate that. And thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Reach out if we can help. Thanks.
Cheers.